Hello, and welcome to the Recordings at Risk Recipient Informational Webinar. We'd like to begin by congratulating you all once again on being selected as grant recipients for the Recording at Risk program. There are a varied and remarkable collection of projects represented here, and we know how much work has gone into them already, and we're excited to share some information about what happens next as your projects begin. We're going to start off with some introductions, first to this platform and then to our team. To start off, we want to share some notes about how you can use Zoom during this session. A live transcript is being generated if you'd like to utilize it. To turn on this feature, click the CC Live transcript button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Attendees will be muted throughout the presentation. However, you're welcome to use chat for general introductions and conversation. If a chat box isn't already displaying on your Zoom screen, you can hover your mouse toward the bottom of the screen and open it manually. In order to send a message to everyone, remember to change the default from all panelists to all panelists and attendees. Because of how busy chat can get, we ask that you use the separate Q&A box to ask questions today, which can be opened the same way as the chat box. You can submit questions at any point during the webinar, and we'll get to them at the end of the webinar. If you're following along with questions as they come in, you can upvote them if they're similar to your own, to let us know that it would be helpful for you to have them answered live. The session recording and transcript will be made available on the Recipient Resources page of our website by the end of the week. And now we're going to turn it over to Becca for some information about CLIR.
We always like to start by reminding everyone of CLIR's mission. The Council on Library and Information Resources, or CLIR, is an independent nonprofit organization that forges strategies to enhance research, teaching, and learning environments in collaboration with libraries, cultural institutions, and communities of higher learning. Recordings at Risk is just one of many programs administered by CLIR and is generously supported by the Mellon Foundation. Cycle 9 was the final cycle we had to award through our current parent grant. We're in conversations with the Mellon Foundation about the future of the program, and any details that we have to share will be posted to our website and in our newsletter as soon as we have them. CLIR's work is accomplished by a relatively distributed staff of about 20 individuals. Today's webinar is led by the grants team, which administers CLIR's active regranting programs, offering support for the entire grant cycle from application to final report. Some or all of you may already know us from applicant webinars or email exchanges, but we'll do some quick introductions so you can put names to faces. I'll start. My name is Becca Kwan. Pronouns are she, her, and I'm a program officer working with grants. I'm located in Riverside, California.
I'm Sharon Burney. I'm a program officer located in Gainesville, Florida. And my pronouns are she and her.
Our colleague Allison Pope, Grants and Contracts Manager, is also helping out today. And our other team member, Joy Banks, wasn't able to attend today's session, but was also part of our support team that got us to this point in the cycle. We also want to extend our sincere thanks to our colleagues, Louisa Quasigrat and Krista Williford, the program's standing review panel, which makes funding recommendations, and AI Media, who is providing captions. During today's session, we'll begin the presentation with some short polls. Then we'll spend the rest of our time with an overview of some of the things you'll need to know about managing your grant. We'll go over an introduction to your reporting requirements so that you can have them in mind as you start your projects. We'll also cover how and why to request a modification and some final notes, including Advice from past recipients. We'll end with time for your questions. We especially want to welcome staff who may not be overseeing the projects, but working on them day to day. It's really important to us that you hear about all the details so that you can understand how your work fits into your organization's grant and into the larger cultural heritage preservation efforts at CLIR. We'd like to center today's conversation by acknowledging that as residents of the United States, we're speaking to you from unceded lands of many Indigenous people. I'd like to respectfully acknowledge and recognize the original and current caretakers of the land, water, and air where I live, the Cahuilla, Tongva, Luiseño, and Serrano peoples, and all of their ancestors and descendants. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on their homelands, and I ask you to join me in acknowledging all Indigenous communities, their elders both past and present, as well as future generations. May this acknowledgement and our ongoing work demonstrate CLIR's commitment to beginning the process of working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. We invite you to share a land acknowledgement for the area where you live in the chat and to visit the link on the slide to learn more. Before we proceed further, we must also acknowledge the shootings this past week in Buffalo, Dallas, and Laguna Woods. Amidst the many other colliding crises right now, including the ongoing pandemic and fires in the Southwest, we know these are very difficult times. We want to especially acknowledge the grief being felt in the African American and Asian American communities, as well as other BIPOC communities at large. We'd like to take a few moments in silence together to recognize and honor their voices. Thank you for that. So here is again the summary of our presentation today, and we'll get started with a few polls.
While pandemic-related closures hopefully won't be as prominent for your projects, given our experience with the Recordings at Risk program, we know that you're likely to encounter challenges during your project work. We have 3 questions for you that will help us make sure we're providing the support you need over the next few months. We'll have each question up for around 60 seconds, and to respond, you simply click on the answer that's applicable to you when it pops up on your screen. Answering is optional, but we will really find it useful to our team. So the first question that we're going to ask is on vendor contact. Has your team been in touch with your vendor since you received funding? Yes, no, or I'm not sure. And then the next one would be, go ahead.
And the results of that were that most people have been in touch with their vendors, which is great.
Sounds good. The next question we're going to ask is vendor hurdles. And if yes, is your vendor anticipating any delays in getting work done at this time? And the possible choices are yes, no, or our vendor isn't sure, or I'm not sure.
We'll wait just a moment. And the results of that are looking like vendors are anticipating getting work done on time without delays, which is a huge shift from what we've seen in the last couple of cycles. So that's very encouraging.
That's great. And the next question we have for the poll is mitigating challenges. Do you have a plan in place to address project challenges when they come up? And the choices for that one are yes, no, or I'm not sure.
And the results of that are a little more mixed. It looks like there's sort of a spread across all the options. And it's definitely very difficult to predict what challenges may come up. So it's hard to have a plan to address them, but this is helpful to know.
Yes. Thank you everyone for your responses, especially for that last one. We hope part of your plan will be contacting us if challenges arise, so we can figure out how best to support the project. We love for you to expand on your responses via the chat as we continue. The challenges you may encounter could mean you'll need a project modification, and we'll get to that later in the presentation. For now, we'll start with CLIR's reporting requirements for grantees. Seeing what will be required at the end of your project may help you to decide how to document progress and keep metrics about the work. We hope this will make reporting easier when your projects are complete. Your starting point will always be the Recordings at Risk Recipient Resources page. In much the same way as the Applicant Resources page help guide your proposal writing, the Recipient Resources page is a one-stop shop for grant recipients, with information on all the administrative components of holding a CLIR grant. Most of the information we'll be covering today can be found there if you ever need a refresher on our policies. The recording of this webinar will also be posted to this page. You were all awarded grants this spring in the 9th Recordings at Risk competition. And for that reason, you will hear us refer to you as a group as our Cycle 9 recipients. To keep things easy for everyone, we start by putting everyone on the same 12-month timeline for completion of projects, regardless of the project length you originally proposed. We hope this will set your projects up for success. Given this 12-month timeline, all of you have been assigned a project end date of April 30th, 2023. This is the date by which all approved project activities, including digitization, metadata creation, and providing whatever access you're providing, should be complete. Grant funds may only be expended during this 12-month period. To change this timeline, you'll need to get approval from us, which we will cover shortly. Given the compact nature of your projects, we start by only requiring a final report. Final reports are due within 30 to 90 days of project completion. So this would mean that the latest possible reporting deadline would be July 31st, 2023. You may find that your project ends earlier than April 30th, 2023, or that you're ready to submit your report earlier than July 31st, 2023. Submitting the final report early is welcomed. You'll just need to contact the CLIR grants team at recordingsatrisk@clir.org so we can start the reporting process.
Grant reports are submitted through the online grant management system, SMApply, just like your proposal, using the same login and password as your proposal submission. In addition to the narrative about your project and total materials digitized, we also require a full financial report. If you forgot the login credentials or lose access to them for any reason, for example, if the person who created your application leaves your organization, you'll need to contact us through the program email so that we can link your report to the correct credentials. One of the system safety measures ensures that only the primary account holder is able to submit a report. So if you've added collaborators to your proposal space and one of them eventually needs to submit, that person will need to contact us to make sure this can happen. You can also find a link to SMApply on the Recipient Resources page. All communication and reminders for reporting will be sent to the active PIs and any additional contacts you've provided to our team. If there are any others involved in project work who need such notifications, you'll need to send the names and contact information for those folks to our program email address. Please share this info as soon as possible so we can keep our recordings up to date. We're now going to take you on a tour of the final reporting form itself, If due to a future modification to your project, you're required to submit an interim report, most of the elements here will be the same. The first section of the report is the quantitative assessment. Here you'll be entering information related to the numbers and types of recordings nominated for digitization, the number of archival master files produced, and variances between the estimated and actual digitization numbers. To complete this part, it will be helpful to have access to your original proposal for your project. Taking the time now to put a copy of your proposal in a place where all team members can access it is a good idea. You can download a copy of your proposal by logging into the system using the same credentials you used to create your application. If you don't know where to find a copy of your proposal, you can also email us and we can send one to you. The next section includes space to document project developments, both internal and public. Internal developments may include things like digitization metrics, such as tracking time for steps in your project workflows, metadata creation, ingest, etc. The implementation of new workflows, standards, protocols, or procedures for digitization and description. The implementation of new tools or systems, and any new donations or grant applications that have resulted from your project. CLIR pulls together data about the impact of its program for its own annual report to the Mellon Foundation. So providing us with as many details as you can about the ways that this opportunity has affected your organization, collections, staff, and ways of working will be very helpful to us. Taking notes somewhere about the impact of this grant will help you easily complete this section. We also want to hear about any public developments, such as the creation of new blogs, blog posts, social media accounts, websites, or even content created for existing sites. Research guides, online or physical exhibitions or news articles, the incorporation of digitized materials into curricula at any educational level, or publications or presentations about the project or arising from research that uses the digitized material. Again, keeping a file with copies of these kinds of documentation will make reporting easier for you. You'll also have a chance to append copies of these documents to your report, demonstrating the varied and creative ways you'll use your project to educate and serve others.
Here's a quick glimpse of what these impact questions look like on the reporting form. The report form includes simple checkboxes to document activity, which you'll then have the opportunity to explain further in the narrative portion of your report. Here is the checklist for internal impacts. And here is the checklist for public outcomes, because Recordings at Risk is designed to support smaller scale efforts focused on preservation, reformatting of audio and audiovisual materials over short periods of time. CLIR does not expect that all of these things will happen in the course of your work. Most recipients just check 2 or 3 boxes here, and some don't check any, and that is okay. Just check any boxes that do apply to you, so we will know to look for them in your narrative and to account for them in your own summary reporting to the Mellon, to account for them in our own summary reporting to the Mellon Foundation. Next, we ask grant recipients to share with us where users can go to find information about the digital copies of the recordings reformatted through your project. Some of you will be providing public access to both the digital files and the associated metadata created through your project, and others may only be providing public access to the metadata. CLIR expects you to provide access as you described in your proposal. This is a good place to remind everyone that creating and providing access to metadata for the digital copies of the recordings created through your project is a requirement of the program, unless a specific exception was made in your proposal for cultural reasons. CLIR expects that you will create and publish online at least some basic metadata for the digital copies of the recordings, so people can learn about what you have. At the end of your project, you may still have work to do to add richer descriptions, subject headings, or even transcriptions or captions, but we do expect that some basic records about what you've done be posted somewhere online. In this report section, you'll have the option to include up to 10 URLs. We encourage you to provide a few high-level links to the collections rather than lower-level links. These links allow us to verify that you have made metadata accessible at the least, and as well as verify that those of you who can make the digital surrogates of recordings available for streaming online have done so. Again, we understand that for some of you, legal and ethical issues will make it impossible to provide full access to your copies of your recordings. If this is the case, you just need to provide one or more links to where your metadata is at the end of your project. You can also provide more information about future locations for your metadata and files in the narrative sections of your report. You'll then provide the contact information for the project PIs, service provider, and the person who should be contacted if questions emerge about the report. You're muted, Becca.
Thank you. The final question of the report is a financial narrative. In the financial narrative, you should comment on actual grant expenditures during the reporting period as they relate to your proposed budget. The financial narrative is also where you're able to address any grant modifications that may have included budget reallocations. Every budget category included in the original proposal budget should be addressed here. And if there are any variances of 5% or more between projected and actual spending, make sure to include a detailed explanation here. Once you've completed all the form prompts, you'll either save this section of the form or mark it as complete. At any point, you can select Save and Continue Editing if you need to pause work on the report form. Marking the report form as complete will take you to the review page where you can double check the information you entered and review the additional steps you'll need to take. There are a few documents to upload before you'll be ready to submit your reports. On the left of the screen, SMApply displays a list of buttons that will prompt you to upload the remaining components of the report, which we'll go over now one by one.
The first and perhaps most important part of your report is the project narrative. This will be an uploaded document of no more than 6 pages, which will contain the types of information listed here: a summary of the project and purpose of your grant, your progress towards expected outcomes where you can explain the numbers, including any variances in your quantitative section, any surprises, setbacks, and challenges that you faced, significant accomplishments and lessons learned, and finally, your future plans. Ultimately, this is information that will help us create resources that can be of use to other organizations wanting to initiate their own AV digitization projects. We'll also share the lessons learned from grantees with our funder, the Mellon Foundation, which receives a complete copy of every report. If you take the time to compile notes somewhere about these topics during the course of your project and save those notes in the same place you keep your copy of the original proposal, you will thank yourself when the project deadline approaches. Here is a screenshot of what the system displays when you're asked to upload the form. The task instructions include directions about all the topics your narrative report should cover. Select the Attach File button to upload your complete PDF document, and then select the Mark as Complete button. Final reports require a project manifest, a spreadsheet which includes the names and locations of the digital files, normally the access copies, as well as notations about any checksums and restrictions. This requirement allows us to use an automated web crawler that CLIR has developed to conduct periodic checks that the online files created through CLIR's digitization regranting programs are in fact online. Note that CLIR's template for this has multiple tabs, including one with instructions, so be sure to read through all of them. Taking a look at this template now and building in time to create this document into your workflow will help you save time later. Normally, your digitization vendor will return a spreadsheet to you that will be very similar to what you submit here. And you should be able to adapt the vendor's spreadsheet for this template. If you work out your file naming conventions at the start and ensure your vendor names your files exactly according to your needs, most of your work for this requirement will already be done. If you leave it until the end, it might take some effort to pull it together. So we do strongly recommend coming up with a strategy for compiling this data during the course of your project work. Of all of the pieces of the final report, this document is what allows us to verify that you have created all the deliverables agreed upon when you received funding. If in the midst of your project, issues arise that will affect your ability to reach the goals included in your application, reach out to CLIR Grants team so we can help you decide the best course of action. We will go over how to do that shortly, but first, let's finish up the report form.
The last required upload is the financial report. We already discussed the financial narrative, which is part of the report form task. The financial report is the upload that corresponds to the narrative. This is an upload using the same budget and financial report template that you submitted with your proposal. A copy of this was emailed to all PIs at the same time as your award letters. Be sure to save that form to use for your future report. The budgeted numbers are already complete, so you'll just need to fill in the actual fields of the template. If you lose this file at any point, just let us know. It's important that you use this template for your financial report rather than any internal financial forms from your institution. Some of you may find that you do not spend all of the grant. This is okay. We will, however, expect you to return any unspent funds exceeding $100 to CLIR at the time you submit your financial report. Our recipient resources page includes more information on CLIR's return of funds policy. To help facilitate collaborative report writing outside of the online system, we've also created a Google Doc template that your team can use to prepare your draft report. The document includes all of the information requested in the report, covering both the questions on the form and the documents that will be added as uploads. Some of you may have used a similar template when you prepared your applications. It's the same principle here. Just make your own personal copy of the document and save it somewhere your team can find it. Then when your team is happy with your responses, copy and paste from the document into SMApply to submit your report. You can access the Google Doc template using the link on our Recordings at Risk Recipient Resources page. To make a personal copy that you can edit, click on the highlighted text that says, "Click here to make a copy of the document." This copy can then be shared with anyone who will be assisting on the report. We'll share the link to the template in the chat. So you can just take a look at it now, or even make a copy so you can start keeping your notes about your project in that space for easy drafting later. And now I will pass things back over to Sharon.
Thank you. So now that we made it through the reporting form, we'll address how you can make changes to your plans if unforeseen delays, problems, or staffing changes happen during the course of your work. Over the course of many grant projects, we've seen that the need often arises to request a modification. Due to the unpredictability of audio and audiovisual digitization initiatives, such requests are extremely common for this program. So please don't hesitate to ask us for the changes you need to successfully complete your project. CLIR has an online modification request form through which recipients can notify us of any modification requests such as no-cost extensions, PI changes, and reallocation requests. The form was designed to streamline the process and reduce the amount of time spent making and approving these requests. Access to the grant modification and extension request form is available through a link at the top of the Recipient Resources webpage, which is always the best place to access the most up-to-date forms and information on managing your award. The form is designed to allow for the request of multiple types of modification requests at the same time. The form includes space for you to submit budget information, requested extension length if needed, and to provide a brief explanation of the modification. In order for you to prepare the necessary information for the modification request form, we also provide a Google Doc modification form template, also available on the Recipient Resources page. This shows the Google Doc template for the modification request form, so you know the questions that you'll be asked and can draft responses. As with all of our Google Doc templates, a link is provided at the top of the document that allows you to create a copy of the template for collaborative working. All modification requests should be submitted through the online form, so you will need to copy and paste your prepared responses into that space. Here's a glimpse of the current grant modification and extension request form. In many cases, completing the form will be all you need to do to get approval for a modification. However, under certain circumstances, additional documentation may be required in order to move forward with the request. Always be sure to check the Recipient Resources page for additional explanation of the various allowable modification requests and the most current policies and procedures. Multiple types of modification requests can be submitted at the same time using the same form. For example, if you need to request a no-cost extension as well as a reallocation of funds, the form will accommodate both requests. Once the form has been submitted and received, you should hear from CLIR staff within 2 weeks. If you have any questions about the process, CLIR staff is always available via email through our program email address, recordingsatrisk@clir.org. Now for some additional information about the types of modification requests. No-cost extensions are allowed in the case of unforeseen delays, such as hiring or vendor processing delays. These are very common, but it is important to understand that you can only receive one extension per project. It may be useful to set a calendar reminder now to help you remember to evaluate whether or not you'll need to request an extension as your project end date approaches. For those who may be new to grants, a project end date is not the same as the reporting deadline. The project end date is the date by which all project work should be completed. It's important that extension requests are submitted about 4 to 6 weeks prior to the project's end date, which is April 30th, 2023. So even if you have spent all of the grant funds, you will need an extension if you require additional time to complete your proposed project deliverables. including making the metadata for your project available online. If all project deliverables are not complete by the end date, you will need an extension. If you need to update principal investigators or PIs, please let us know as soon as possible by completing the grant modification form. All of CLIR's grant management tasks require current contact details, so it is important we know when a PI departs your organization and their responsibilities are transferred to someone else. In order to complete the change of PI, you will also be required to supply via email a letter from the head of the organization or department on organizational letterhead. This letter should include the name, title, and contact information of the new PI, as well as the date the change will become effective. A CV or resume for the new PI will also be required for our files.
On occasion, you may find it necessary to spend grant funds in a manner other than originally proposed in your application. For example, vendor services may cost more or less than you originally budgeted. Reallocations of grant funds are allowable, but these changes must be approved by CLIR staff prior to the reallocated funds being spent. In cases where a budget surplus remains after the original deliverables have been met, you'll have the option of either returning the surplus funds to CLIR or submitting a reallocation request that proposes how the remaining funds will be spent. Any proposed use of these leftover funds should be aligned with the original goals and scope of the project and within the current guidelines for allowable and disallowed costs for the Recordings at Risk program. The first step for a reallocation request is completing the grant modification form, where you can explain the rationale for the reallocation and how it is consistent with the original proposal. CLIR staff encourages spending surplus funds on additional digitization of materials or increased spending for another previously approved line item in the project budget, rather than adding new line items. If a mutually satisfactory reallocation solution cannot be found, remaining funds must be returned to CLIR. Note that small reallocations amounting to less than 5% of the total project budget and within the program guidelines do not require a formal reallocation request. But we do ask that you explain these variances in your final report. If questions arise about whether or not you need official approval of the reallocation request, we're always available through email. In some rare instances, such as when a reallocation request does involve a new budget level, our team will require that you complete an updated budget document. This is the same template for your application and reporting. CLIR staff can provide a copy to you if needed. If approved, this new budget will replace the one that was emailed to you along with your award letter. Some information will remain the same, such as your project start date and award amount. You'll need to update any lines where you're proposing a change in the amount and add any additional lines as needed if you're proposing a new spending category. In some cases, reallocations may happen within already approved line items. When that's the case, we likely won't require that you submit a new budget. An explanation of the changes in your grant modification form and in your final report will suffice. We've encountered a few other types of modifications for this program that are important to process with CLIR prior to implementing the change. From time to time, recipients find that the vendor they selected in the application may not be able to fulfill the project after award. Or perhaps your organization has a policy against pre-selection of a vendor and your selected process post-award has identified a more suitable option. Or maybe to help with processing, you'd like to add a second vendor. Any of these should be approved by CLIR prior to starting work with a new vendor so that we're in agreement that the new vendor meets the digitization standards approved in your application. As mentioned when we were discussing budget reallocations, you may find that you have the funds and capacity to add other materials to your project. Or perhaps digitization costs are much higher than estimated, and significant amounts of material now need to be cut out of the project. Please work with CLIR via the modification process to come to an agreement on these changes. We've also supported the addition of other allowable processing work, such as additional transcription, to help spend down remaining funds. These are just a few examples of other types of modifications. We may ask for additional supporting documentation to help us understand and document the changes to your projects. We're always glad to answer any questions you might have. So as we near the end of our presentation, feel free to submit questions in the Q&A box, and we'll get to them in a little bit.
Our recipients have shared so much with our team through their reports and conversations. And here are some of the points stressed by them that may be useful to you as you get started. The first is metadata creation for audiovisual materials takes a lot longer than originally anticipated for most recipients. For this reason, past recipients advise that new recipients consider how they can lay the groundwork for creating project metadata while waiting for materials to be returned from the vendor. Taking digital photographs of the containers for your recordings may help expedite metadata creation while the vendor has them. So consider whether it might be possible for you to do that. Second was get your whole project team together, including your vendor as early as possible to make sure everyone understands individual roles and responsibilities, even if their contributions will only be made late in the project timeline. That way, each team member can make room on their schedules to do what they need to do in a timely and efficient manner. It is particularly important for people responsible for ingesting digital files into storage systems or creating metadata for those files to understand what will be expected of them and for them to remain aware of any changes to the project timeline. Don't forget, it is okay to request a grant modification if it turns out that the grant term is insufficient for creating metadata and making it available online. Third, if the recordings to be digitized for your project are part of a larger collection, set aside some additional backup items from that collection to send to your vendor as well. Just in case the digitization work costs less than originally estimated or the content of the materials is unrecoverable. If you have extra funds left over, you can then submit a grant modification request to CLIR, seeking permission to authorize the vendor to digitize the backup items as part of the project. And fourth, keeping notes and documentation for your project in one common place for easy reference will make final reporting easier. Determining how you're going to gather the information needed for the project manifest now, in particular, will save you valuable time.
We want to quickly share a couple ways to get involved with CLIR's communities. The Digital Library Federation, or DLF Forum, is planned to be in person in Baltimore this year, and we hope that you'll think about joining us. Our team is also planning the Digitizing Hidden Collection Symposium as an affiliated event taking place just after the larger conference. The symposium will be centered on the experiences of Hidden Collections grantees and will be open to the public. We also invite you to sign up for our Grants and Programs newsletter if you haven't already. This occasional newsletter shares updates across CLIR along with other things we think are interesting. Finally, there are more than 10 amazing working groups coordinated by DLF where practitioners meet regularly on a variety of digital library topics. A couple in particular that I want to shout out are the Metadata Support Group, which runs a Slack space for folks dealing with metadata, and the Digital Accessibility Working Group, which offers accessibility audits of websites and systems, which you can either contribute to or take advantage of. You're muted, Sharon.
Thank you. We love to boost the excellent work of our grantees, and if there are exciting developments you would like shared with a wider audience, don't hesitate to let us know. One of the easiest ways for us to share your news and accomplishments is to tag us on Twitter at CLIR Grants so that we can retweet you. If you happen to be describing the Recordings at Risk program in any formal press releases, we appreciate you reviewing CLIR's acknowledgement guidelines, linked to on our CLIR's policy page. We also want to make sure we're representing you correctly. So your projects are now up on the funded projects page of our website. Please read how your project is described there and let us know if you'd like us to adjust any of the information included. The project summaries are directly from your proposals. So thank you all for attending this presentation. We know we've covered a lot of information here, and we'll be sure to post a recording of this webinar, as well as the slides, transcript, and Q&A on our Recipient Resources page, alongside many of the other documents we discussed. We're now going to shift to answering any questions you've submitted during our presentation.
It looks like our first question is, if we find an additional tape to be digitized, but our vendor is able to digitize it without exceeding the budget, do we need to get approval? If it's just one tape, I would say send us a quick email, and we'll probably just really quickly be able to say that it's fine, rather than doing an entire modification process. But we do want to be aware of any adjustments or additions. So please do let us know if that happens. And the second question is, can the PowerPoint be made available? And yes, we will definitely be posting the slides as well as the recording. And it looks like that's it. By now, you all know where to contact us if you have any questions. recordingsatrisk@clir.org. A few final reminders. If any additional members of your team should be getting updates from us and don't already, please email us to let us know. Remember that extensions and modifications are very common, and if you want to initiate a process or just talk about what that might look like, we're always happy to discuss. Finally, the grants team is here to support you, so please do get in touch at any time. We may also reach out occasionally to check in about how things are going and as we assess the program and plan for the future. So thank you so much, and take care. Good luck with your projects.